Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Walaikum salam.
It's a pleasure meeting you. What's your name again?
My name's Ammar.
Ammar. Okay. So we have a brother, we've met first time. Brother is from
Singapore.
Singapore. What interests me to have a discussion with this brother is, again, those of you who are watching and will be watching later, inshallah, is to learn from our brother, Ammar from Singapore, because it is the youth that we should be learning from in terms of the problems they are facing, they have faced, and how they have overcome these problems, how they have actually gone through these issues and then found a way to solve them. And this, I think, is very important for all us to go through so that we learn from it. Because often it's easier for us to give you advice and suggestions, do this and do that, and when we realize that you are on the receiving end of problems, you faced the problem and then you said, these are the things that we did and it helped us. It's only then we learn that actually not all solutions have equal value in terms of how they work. Not all ideas and concepts and practical applications are the same. Some of them are better than the others. So this is, inshallah, today, Brother Ammar, I'm going to learn from you. So tell me, you said at one point, you look very young to me, but at one point you went through a journey, and you have a friend too that you're going to discuss about, a journey where you were thinking about whether God exists or not, and so on. So do you want to just expand a bit more on this, inshallah?
So I was born and raised in a Muslim family. However, it was one of those things where it was like traditional, where you just believe because your parents say so, or you were born this way, or in the Quran it says they're this religion because of their forefathers, and I really think that just because you're born in a specific religion can't doesn't make it true. So at the time, as I was growing up, I was practicing just because, not because of I was critically thinking or whatever. But as I turned 12, 13, I started critically thinking, how can there be a God? Is there really a God?
SubhanAllah, this is at the age of 12 and 13.
Yeah.
From that young age.
I think it's from exposure from media and all these movies and all these, I don't know, the world, especially during 12 and 13, the rise of new atheism and I don't know, everyone was being really secular.
So what was it at the age of 12 and 13 that you were questioning this? What were the things that you were exposed to in particular?
So obviously I was exposed to the traditional, conventional teachings of the madrasa and basic Islam, the fundamentals and all that, but they don't explain it to an extent which I was satisfied. Topics where, now retrospectively I can look back and I see why I turned to atheism. It's because of there was not, it wasn't an adequate, it didn't quench my thirst of knowledge. So I had especially topics like qadar and theodicy and all these kind of things. At the age of 12 and 13, I just could not wrap my head around. And I don't know if that was because I didn't have the capacity, or people were unable to explain to me at that time. Or maybe it might be because a lot of older people, they might underestimate children sometimes at times. So they kind of just because they were too lazy to explain to me just because I was too young. And I think that's quite damaging, because if you keep telling someone, just do it, they come up thinking we're just doing it just because. And now I see my Christian friends doing this, or my friends of other religions. I went to international school, so I saw many different races, ethnicities, culture, religion, right? So I just thought we're just one of them. It doesn't matter. So I realized it can't all be true. Therefore, it must all be false. And with the incentive that Hollywood and all this is. They portray God as a human, this and that. They make jokes about it, so you kind of take it less and less seriously. But
interesting point. So you watched those movies in which they talk about all these gods and Greek gods and other things in the movies, and so eventually at one point, because of these kind of media input, this is some kind of slow conditioning, of course, you felt even the whole existence of creator outside of these movies, in a religious sense, not very important.
Well, I guess for you to say what is or what isn't, you need to know what it is first. So the definition of God was kind of misconstrued by Hollywood and all these shows and all these kind of things. And I said, that's no God. These people are no God. So I just kind of stopped. I didn't dive deep. I just said, oh yeah, there can be a God. because you know when you're young, you think you're invincible, you're so smart. At the time I studied like physics, chemistry, and all these things, so I thought like, oh yeah, you can explain everything. But you can explain everything up until a certain point. And every atheist, scientist, they will say, yes, we only know until a certain point, because anything beyond that, we don't know. Even with math, with Kurt Gödel, he proved that math is incomplete. Even philosophy, they proved that you cannot, there's no 100% truth in philosophy. That is without God, obviously. Obviously, we know, like, you know, the 5 big questions. I think Hamza Yusuf made it quite popular, the eschatological, theological. The only way we can answer all these questions is through a divine nature, because, like, without it, you can't. I asked my atheist friends that all these questions. They all say, "I don't know," or "It doesn't matter," or this kind of like nihilistic, secular. This is the typical response. I don't know.
So this is another element to understand in this scene is you had friends who were also atheists,
Yeah.
and you have of course interactions with them.
Yeah.
So would that have also have molded your thinking at one point?
I think one of my principles that I really resonated with was you are who you surround yourself with. You are what you eat. You are this. You are your environment. Basically, is you. You are the end product of the environment.
And have the stick on your back for the microphone, please. Yeah, correct.
Like, for example, if you surround yourself with a bunch of smokers, if you surround yourself with a bunch of I don't know, people who think a certain way or think this is cool or that is cool,
Yeah.
you're more likely to be molded that way, especially when you're at a young age. Especially when you're at a young age.
Right.
Because that's when you're the most influential, the most malleable, I think.
So friendship does count. So that was like at the age of 12 and 13 when you felt even questioning the very concept, and the answers that were provided by the people that you went to, you didn't feel they were adequate, or you even thought, is it that you didn't have the capacity to understand yourself because you're quite young? Or is it that people were not giving you the answers because of they thought, you're not old enough to even ponder on those and have understanding of it. Yeah. So they often brushed it aside, saying, okay, it's not important, whatever it might be. And that put you off from receiving an adequate response, adequate answer.
I think it's all of the above, actually. Like, looking back, obviously you can say like, oh, I wish this happened, that happened, this happened, but now I know everything happens for a reason. But I think we should have, like, especially those who are Muslim, they should be very, 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 very patient. Because I think even when I started learning about Islam, I learned through the lens or vicariously through reverts. Because I felt like I could resonate with them more, they understood me more. Because I had most of my teachers, they were very strict. And I think one thing that we have to realize now, because we live in a time and era of secularism, we have to understand that not a lot of people are exactly at the same point as you. Even though you might want to give dawah or you want to do this or that, I know your intentions are good, but like a lot of my teachers when I was young, they forced viewpoint or thinking on me, which I was not at their level yet. So they would tell me about, oh, this haram, haram, this haram, haram. Yeah, but I'm not even sure if God exists yet. You tell me about, like, you know that hadith, if they teach them to believe in one God, and if they do that, then teach them to pray, then teach them to, it's in steps, right? That was the way in Mecca, when it first started. I feel like that approach would have done very well to me. But I don't know, nowadays, especially I think a lot of Muslim teachers around where I was, they were very harsh and very strict and not very open to, like, everything was down to detail. Like, you have to sit down and drink with your right hand and take a breath every three sips and all this. And I was like, it's just too much for a young person at such a young age who doesn't even know why he's doing it. And I was all these questions. I think you should tackle the biggest questions, the fundamental questions, before you focus on the smaller things.
So this is about the Islamic pedagogy or if you want to say this, educational model, educational system, which you feel the current situation in the world is such that it needs to have a change or transformation in the way this is taught to our children, our youngsters. in the past there was one method in which you just learn by memorization,
Yeah.
and otherwise you're disciplined because you have to do's and don'ts that you've just taken in. But it seems to be now, because of the engagement and interactions of our youth with other cultures, other systems, and other ideologies, and having friendship with people who adhere to those systems of ideology or faith or none at all, then it seems like you cannot simply approach this problem of educating and making our youngsters learn by simply telling them what to learn, but it has to be a different model approach. Like the example you gave about how you can connect to a revert, whether how they're facing and how they're learning. So because their approach, again, they're not believing by blind faith anymore. They're questioning, they're making sure they understand, and they apply it in their lives, because only then, a revert is a revert because they have come to realization that Islam is truth, that they have come to a realization that Allah exists, the Creator exists. So this kind of empowering oneself is not going to happen unless the educational system of education in our countries, in our madrasas maybe, needs a change, a look at. So this is a suggestion from our young brother here to those people involved in systems of education, systems where you actually implement policies on a national level or on an international level perhaps, that you need to rethink again, how do our youth connect to belief and other systems around them in terms of making it their own personal choice, in terms of their acceptance of such a system or such a belief or such an ideology. It is no longer going to be the model that we've applied before. It is something different now. You have to say, what does our youth connect with? How does our youth connect in learning? What are the methods of education now that you're going to put in front of our youngsters that they appreciate it and say, yes, I will learn that way. It's no longer where you simply just say, believe in it and that's it. It's no longer the case anywhere. You have to give them enough rational justification, enough ways for them to think to their level of understanding so that they appreciate the answer to that level. So this is a very good point for our policymakers to think and see how you can just make the transformation on our systems of education, inshallah ta'ala. So what made you, Brother Ammar, to change your thinking from after the age of 12 and 13 when you went to that transition? What made you come back? What was it? What helped you? What are the things that influenced you to say, you know what, now I'm back on track? What were those things?
If I had to, obviously it wasn't overnight, but if I had to summarize, I would say is the fact that nihilism and materialism, they don't lead you anywhere. Like, I grew up very blessed, so I could get a lot of things that I wanted really quick, but it didn't really satisfy me no matter how much I got. And the economics problem is that there's infinite wants, finite needs. But the thing is, I realized no matter how much I have, I might be happy for a while, but no matter how much I have, whether it's a car or clothes or food, whatever, I could take as much as I want. I'll never be satisfied completely, if that makes sense. So I reached a point in my life where I've had a very blessed and grateful lifestyle, but it just didn't satisfy me to the extent that I want. I felt like something was missing, like I had a hole in my heart. That led me to depression, and then that made me question my existence and led me to find answers and do more research, and it all led me to it was actually at 4 a.m. after going out with my friends. One of them mentioned, what about the miracles of the Quran? That was my first exposure to it, and I was like, at first it took me aback a bit, because I was like, I never really knew or never really thought there were actual real miracles. I know about the miracles of the past prophets and all this, but I was like, yeah, that's just stories of old folklore, right? But when I actually tried to study religion, give it a second look, I realized that the only religion that had facts, evidence, and something to actually stand on was Islam and the Quran. And I studied all the other religions where they didn't really stand the test, you know. And this made me like really, really curious. And I didn't want to tell my parents, I didn't want to tell my friends, because this is something very personal to me. If I wanted to believe it, I wanted to believe it because I believe it, not because any teacher. So this was a very private thing that I went through, and I stayed very quiet about it. But I'm sure if you're sincere and you ask for help to your creator or God or whatever you might want to call it, if you really are sincere and you actually put in the effort, I feel like you will arrive at that, the truth. Because if you look at just facts, remove your bias, remove your emotion, remove all sorts of fanaticism, remove all sorts of emotion, and just be rational, be unbiased, and just really look at the facts. There's no religion out there except Islam because of the Quran, because of the miracles, the prophecies, and you cannot doubt. Like, you logically just cannot doubt that this is a miracle. You just cannot. I mean, logically, you just cannot. I don't know. Maybe that's just my opinion, but obviously I could list it on and on and on and on. But
that really shows that our transformation, when we undergo these phases, we don't want everyone to really go through these phases to come to a realization like this. At least take a hint from there that, no matter how you feel that, religion doesn't make sense, God doesn't exist, you can do whatever you want, you will sooner or later come to the realization that all of this nihilistic view, the view that, okay, nothing has any purpose, any meaning, eventually you come to a point where it may be too late. But it's very, good to see that our brother, even from the very young age, has returned back at a very young age as well, rather than spending his life in misery and suffering. This is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we don't want all of you to undergo these processes yourself, where it's, you eventually come back, you can spare these trials and tribulations and say, what, let me really go deep into understanding Islam. And then you will find that, okay, you should have done that long time ago, rather than going through this. It may be that you weren't exposed to the correct teaching, but now take that opportunity. Resources are available. I mean, what resources did you find that helped you? This is something that we can, tell our audience.
Okay, at this day and age, there's no way, there's no excuse where you can say, I can't do this, I can't find this. Everything's on the internet. And it's not just about Islam, it's not just about... I learned a lot of philosophy, history, all this, just from... Obviously, there are your ways of filtering through credible sources and all this, and that's a whole different thing, but... Everything that you want to find out, you can find out on the internet. We have the entire library at our disposal, at our fingertips. So there's not really an excuse. It's just about willpower and do you really want to find the truth? Do you really want to know? It's just, I guess, to what extent do you really want, to find out if there really is a creator or not? Because I spent hours on end, staying up, reading, researching, multiple websites, watching multiple videos. And if I had a question, I would search up the question, what people would say for, what people would say against, what the Muslims would say, what the non-Muslims would say. And then I would look at, what's their facts, and you have to leave your bias aside. And to be honest, quite frankly, I didn't want Islam to be true. Because, when you're not so good person, you don't want to be accountable. You don't want good and bad to exist, because you realize, wait, I've been bad. So I think a lot of people, they have that, does a creator exist? They have that thought, they go through, when you go through a hard time, you have those thoughts, but I think most people, they put it aside, or they always wait on it, or they just kind of procrastinate, and they just kind of put it aside by watching all these shows, going to all these distractions, whatever. They just distract themselves, whether it's intoxicating themselves with actual drugs, alcohol, or movies, music. They just sink themselves in any modern type of euphoria, and it comes in different forms these days, and we have many options these days. But I think I couldn't escape it. I was at a point where I could not escape. I had to answer the question. I could not help myself.
SubhanAllah. This again, gives us a point to reflect on the amount of destruction people go through just not to believe in a creator, even though when they search and then when they investigate, ponder and reflect, they find the answers are there, that it makes sense to be there to be a creator. It makes sense because all the proof and evidence suggest, to this point. And yet, because of people's own whims and desires perhaps, which they feel that if I now believe in a creator, the responsibility comes in that I cannot behave the way I'm behaving now.
Yeah.
I cannot do all these things that I'm doing right now. So that may be
Or like an arrogance thing where they want to be more superior, where people are CEOs, and I know people who are very successful, they're head of their business, or head of this, or head of the family, and they don't want to play second fiddle, basically. They want to be the head of everything. They want to be in charge. They want to be the biggest, Yeah, it's
exactly.
arrogant.
So arrogance, stubbornness, being personally biased to the truth because of your own interest, self-interest, the feeling of being responsible because you want to be irresponsible in what you're doing rather than someone telling you, because once you realize that Islam is the truth, for example, then you know that you have to be within the realms of a boundary, do's and don'ts, and yet you don't want to do that. So these again, this is something, a point of reflection for everyone. Let not the truth become an obstacle for you just because of your whims and desires. Your momentary life that you're living compared to the real life in the hereafter is not even a blink of an eye. What is eternity compared to this 120 years or so of this dunya? Well, not every people will live 120 years. If you think eternity is a long string with a never-ending string and you are only a part of that string, just imagine what you're missing. You are sacrificing your whole life for your happiness here in that one part section and leaving the whole thing. The joy and the bliss and the tranquility that awaits us in the hereafter compared to the joy that you are feeling now is nothing, because once, this is an example of in the hadith literature where you'll find someone who's dipped into, since they lived all their life happily here, joy, and they're dipped into hellfire just for a fraction of a moment, and they were asked, did you ever feel happiness? Did you ever enjoy happiness and soul? They said never. And if people who went through whole of misery and suffering and torture and happiness and so on, and they were dipped or they were just placed into paradise for just a fraction of a moment, and if they were asked, did you have any unhappiness, any displeasure, any suffering, they will say never. These are the levels of happiness and punishment that awaits us for those who are irresponsible and arrogant and stubborn. So, subhanallah, it's a pleasure to learn from you, brother.
If I could just build on what you just said, you just talked about how paradise is eternity. It's way better than just a fraction of a second here, and you can go on and on about all these benefits. And I agree. I've had the best things in my life, ate the best food, had the nicest things, but nothing has come close to the content of becoming a Muslim or prayer or reading Quran. However, you could go on and telling people all these things, but if they don't believe in it, and it doesn't matter what you say to them, they won't listen. So I think the forefront should be, why is Muslim true? Why are we Muslims? Before we talk about paradise, hellfire, punishment, halal, haram, all these things, the forefront should be, why are we even Muslims in the first place? Why do we even believe it's true? Because I think a lot of people, they try to talk about, oh yeah, being Muslim is great because this X, Y, Z, but sometimes they might forget that that's your viewpoint, that's your belief. Doesn't mean everyone believes that. So I think what you cannot argue about is facts, and because men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie. Facts is facts, whether you like it or not.
So our approach in educating our youngsters has to be on the model of rational argumentation and conviction of our mind and our heart and our soul, not an emotional teaching of our belief and teaching of our culture and our heritage, but giving this education to the mind of these youngsters, who then processes it, understands it, and internalizes this rationally, reasonably, and with intellectual rigor. And then with this robustness of intellectual rigor, they then say, okay, this is what makes Islam true, because they now can feel that, yes, I am not simply believing in things because I was a born Muslim in a Muslim family, but I am believing in it because it is true. There is facts and evidence and the figures and the numbers, as you said, that makes it something that is believable. Because you can't simply use the concept of blind faith and say, you know what, you have to believe. I think it's no longer the case anymore. We have to educate and train and transform our youngsters to move into this realm of intellectual satisfaction of their questions. So do not undermine our youngsters, our youth. When they have questions like this, take the question seriously and try to answer those questions to the best of your ability. If you cannot get a person who is able to answer it, better, so that the inquiry or the quest that our youngsters have, it is satisfied to a level that it brings them deep conviction in their heart and in their mind. It's only through then you will find the Muslim youth remain stable and firm and convinced on the deen of Islam. Other than that, there is always going to be a danger of them going away and going into the ideas of materialism, liberalism, secularism, as individualism, and so on and so forth. So it is, as I said, it's a very good learning opportunity from my perspective now, from someone who has gone through these phases, who has undergone this transformation, and is able to then, thank you, brother, Jazakallah khairan, to then share this knowledge and experience so that we don't have to face the same problem, that we don't have to experience it ourselves. We don't need to go and say, like, I was a drunkard and then I was miserable, then I was on the streets, then I came to now realization later. We can save ourselves from that by knowing that these phases, you can just bypass that by doing certain things, by intellectually asking critical questions and looking for the answers critically, by filtering the information and then arriving at those information which then satisfies your inquiry intellectually, rationally and reasonably. And only then the true happiness and true belonging can take place. You cannot truly belong to say, I am a Muslim, that I am a believer in God, that I believe God exists, a creator exists, only if you had those intellectual conviction in your heart. Is that right? Have I summarized it correctly?
Yeah, I think you did. I think it's I just don't know really how to put it in a short summary. Like, I really cannot explain the content and peace I've actually felt, because after living a life of just you try to eat the best food, drive the best cars, wear the best clothes, but at the end of the day you die, and then what? If you're really gonna die anyway, well, what's the point? You live your life, blah blah, people think you're great for a few years, then so what? The next person comes, then the next person comes, you're not that important. And I guess it was that kind of realization. I was like, no matter how rich I get, someone else will be richer. How smart I get, someone will be smarter. How this X, Y, Z, there's always gonna be someone better than me. So I was always on the losing end. So if I had that mindset, like thinking like, oh, I need to be rich to be happy, I need to have this to be happy. No. I'll tell you right now, no matter how much you get, no matter how much you have, you'll never be satisfied. Even you could be happy for a short time, but trust me, in long term, you'll get used to it. You'll be ungrateful just as you were from the beginning. If you are not content or happy with what you have, you'll never be happy.
I just got reminded by what you're saying. Subhanallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنَّ الْقُلُوبِ أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنَّ الْقُلُوبِ. Is it not that in the remembrance of Allah, the hearts finds tranquility and satisfaction? Absolutely. It's only when we connect to our Lord, connect to our Creator, that you will feel tranquility in your hearts. Then you will truly be happy, that you will truly feel this happiness. Because remember, we are all driving and going and longing for the true happiness and true peace and contentment in our heart. You will never get that. No amount of money, no amount of wealth, no amount of fame will give you that content. Aren't there people who are, so rich and so famous, the celebrities and so on, and they commit suicide? Why?
Overdose.
Why? Because they do not find happiness and peace just by being famous, just by being rich, just by having everything they need. Something in there, as you said, there's a hole in the heart. And that satisfaction in your heart, the peace and the contentment can come from by connecting and remembering with your Creator, with your Lord who created you in the first place.
And I think to summarize that, you could just say simply, either, like I mentioned before, the economics problem. Everyone has infinite wants, but finite needs. This world is finite. And one philosopher said, it's weird how we live so short, but we desire to live so long, or like we have infinite desire.
Yeah.
So we have this infinite desire, but the only thing infinite and eternal is the one and only. So that's why the only reason you find peace with God is because He's the only infinite and eternal. Everything else you try to put the key to happiness in, whether it's material things. Material things are dependent, they're finite, and they're just momentary. Momentarily they're gone.
SubhanAllah. The abundance of rain. SubhanAllah, this may be a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. And it's time for Maghrib, so we're going to go for Maghrib. It's been really a pleasure. I enjoyed listening to you and learning from you.
Thank you.
May Allah bless you, bless your family, and keep you firm and strong, and make you a good da'iyah, good caller to Islam. And we hope that our viewers, our audience, have benefited from this and learnt. And inshallah, take that learning, take that experience, and apply into your life and help others, like the brothers Ammar is helping us, so that we don't have to go through these phases again. And as a last point, I just want to say, okay, it's been really, heartwarming to know that our youth, even though they are faced with these difficulties, they are strong enough to come back to Islam. They're strong enough because of the belief that Allah has given us to believe, the religion that Allah has given us to believe and follow. It is something that is absolutely clear as day. There is no doubt about it. There cannot be any doubt about it. When the brother learnt about it, he came back. So this is something that take on board, that Allah has blessed us to give His last message with such a clarity, such a clear message, that a mind which is critical and thinking and reflective can easily accept it. It's only those who are selfish, self-worshipping their own desires, arrogant or stubborn, or reluctant to find out the truth because of it goes against their whims and desires, they won't be able to accept it. So again, what can I say, brother? Jazakallahu khairan. And inshallah we meet again, and we have another learning from you. And so the brothers and sisters who are watching, do not underestimate the knowledge and experience from our youth. We have a lot to learn from our youth, and we have a lot of responsibility to our youth to look after them, to take care of them, so that they are strong and firm in the deen, so that we are all living in this world, in a world which is going to be, inshallah, the world where Allah's laws are implemented, where there is no oppression, where there is no misery and suffering because of people's exploitation and people's greed, that Allah's laws in this dunya, in this life, is established to implement the justice, so that people are not treated unjustly. People are then living in a world of tolerance and mutual harmony. People are living in peace and tranquility and fulfilling their purpose in this life, so that the hereafter, the ultimate life, is something that we can all look forward to. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر لكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Let's go and pray Maghrib, inshallah.